I know what you did last summer. Let's talk about it. Hey, great to have you here. So today I'll be reviewing the new 2025 I Know What You Did Last Summer. Not to be confused with the original. I kind of hate when reboots use the same name as the original title. I'll briefly go over the synopsis, give some pros and cons, and an overall score. Before jumping in, if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to the channel and joining this community.
What are you waiting for?
What are you waiting for?
So the high-level plot here is we have this group of former high school classmates who reconvene at this engagement party and then head out to watch the fireworks on this really dangerous roadside cliff. And one of our characters, this really obnoxious guy named Teddy, winds up standing in the street, leading to a car flying off the cliff and presumably killing the driver. And similar to that original movie, they wound up making a pact to never speak about this, mostly led by that engaged couple. We then fast forward, advancing a year later, where we're at another party where Danica, the fiance that we saw in the opening, is now with another guy, and she winds up getting a card stating, "I know what you did last summer." And this really launches us into our main story of trying to figure out who sent this card and is now hunting our cast of characters. Looking at the pros and cons of this film, starting off with the pros, while not the biggest fan of this franchise, it was pretty cool to have our legacy characters of Ray and Julie back here. I was mostly satisfied with the roles. Despite some issues, they definitely weren't just random fan service throw-ins, and their inclusion fit pretty well overall within the plot. Second pro for the film, I'll say, and spoiler here for anyone that hasn't seen the movie, so FYI, if you don't want to know about the killer, definitely keep that in mind with this one. But I was happy with the girl that they wound up choosing as the first killer, mainly because I was glad they didn't wind up going with somebody like off-screen, some random unknown fisherman character. I will say though, I didn't really like as much them going with the Freddie Prinze Jr. angle. It seemed like they're trying a bit too much to be like Scream with this duo combination of killers. And then third pro I had for this movie, I really like the environments that were used here. Southport specifically really worked as a town the story returned to. And we had some pretty cool set pieces, like the first act opening car scene with the cliff moment. Now jumping into some of the cons I have of the film, the first one being the scene sequencing and logic had some issues for me. For example, later on in the movie, one of our main cast has the upper hand on the killer, and then 2 seconds later, suddenly in the next scene, that same main cast character is on the ground and trying to fend for their life against the killer who's now on top of them. So kind of weird sequencing as far as going from one thing to another without really much transitioning taking place. We have another moment in the movie where they kind of do the typical trope where they actually are trying to be a little bit smart here and they're saying, hey, let's all stick together. Nobody wound up leaving at this point. And then right after saying that, they all spread out. So it feels like they're trying to be smart and say, hey, let's not do the typical horror movie thing. Let's all stick together. And then they don't stick together. So a little bit strange there. Second con I'll point out for the film, the red herrings here were a bit too obvious for me. While I wasn't positive that the first killer was the former friend Stevie until we wound up seeing her leave for work later on in the movie, I knew the podcaster and the priest had no chance of being the killer right away. Third con I'll point out for the film, the dialogue and characters were a bit cringy at times. Danica, the girl who has multiple fiancés throughout this movie, specifically had some pretty cringy lines that were meant to be funny, and then we would get these serious setup moments for people like Jennifer Love Hewitt, but even those lines didn't really work for me. They just seemed super cheesy, and they really crossed between trying to be silly and serious too often in this movie. So I planned to stop there with the cons, but I had to include probably what was the biggest con for me in this movie. There were so many jump scares. They just relied so heavily on those throughout this movie. Even when there wasn't really a threat, we would get these pop-ups of the crashing, maybe to show some kind of signs of PTSD for our characters, but this movie just relied so heavily on pretty much anything making a loud, sudden noise towards the camera, like this or this. So that wraps up my pros and cons. Before jumping into a final score, I'll give some kind of sub-scores for the movie. The first one being for the plot. This one I'll give a 2 out of 5. We mostly just repeated the same strokes of the original movie, which I thought was just okay. And then for an entertainment score, I'll give this one a 3 out of 5. I personally really enjoy whodunit type of stories, and we had some somewhat tense moments throughout this one. For a gore score, I'll give this one a 3 out of 5. There were some pretty good kills here. Like at one moment, we get a couple characters that are hanging up for display in front of the entire town. And overall, when it comes to the violence for this one, I'd say it kind of walks that fine line between either being a PG-13 and an R-rated movie, even though this is an R-rated film. For a scare score, I'm going to give this one a 2 out of 5. This one's largely dependent on what jump scares do for you. There wasn't a whole lot of tension buildup, and the first fisherman kill was straight up shown in the trailer, so I wasn't too shocked, but I could see this number being a little bit higher for people who react pretty strongly to things that pop out. And then for rewatchability, I'll give this one a 2 out of 5. After knowing who the killer is, some of the suspense is taken out of the movie. You can still have some fun with it, but I doubt I'll rewatch it anytime soon. So for an overall score here for the movie, I'm going to go with a 5 out of 10. By no means would I say this is a good movie, but if you're willing not to judge it too harshly, there's fun to be had here for a summer blockbuster horror movie. But what do you think? If you've seen it, what parts did you like or dislike? Let me know your thoughts on all things the I Know What You Did Last Summer franchise in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you again soon.